Can you tell us a secret?
I don't have many secrets.
The downfall of Elizabeth Holmes has really begun in this week's episode of The Dropout, episode 6, Iron Sisters.
When people talk about glass ceilings, I always say, next to every glass ceiling, there's an iron lady.
Today, we're going to be talking about the episode as a whole, what happened in the show versus what happened in real life. And as a special treat, I'm also going to be showing you the actual Iron Sisters commercial because it is hilarious. And there's also some other little real Theranos treats in this video. So if you want to see the commercial, I'm going to put it at the end, and I will put timestamps for how I'm sectioning out this video as well, in case there's only one or two things that you're interested in. So make sure to check in the description box for the timestamps. But the first thing I want to talk about is the whole Errol Morris ads, and also the bit of marketing we see here with also, you know, the whole Yoda quote on the wall. And then I'm going to break it into the three main sections of the video.
This is our state-of-the-art lobby. Is that her?
Yes, it is. It's like she's doing another interview.
So I have briefly talked about this before, but there is someone who has kind of gotten off scot-free about their affiliation with Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. And there was a chief creative officer at Theranos who was a man named Patrick O'Neill. He actually used to work for Chiat Day, and then Elizabeth kind of poached him. And he very much created this whole image. And I mean, clearly he's really good at what he does. And he was Elizabeth's biggest cheerleader. He actually was in the Inventor, the HBO documentary on Theranos. And he also hired Errol Morris. And he pretty much crafted everything when it came to Theranos. One of the best ads they did, in my opinion anyway, is they had this one that showed tons of clips from movies like E.T., Up, Forrest Gump, where characters have to say goodbye too soon. And they show like a ton of clips, and then at the end they basically said, like, you know, with the white screen, they basically said, we're working on no one having to say goodbye too soon. So I have a ton of the actual original Theranos commercials and like a lot of their marketing material, the website. So I will sprinkle those in this video and the two remaining episodes as well, if anyone's interested. And that, what we saw with Errol Morris was pretty much exactly what happened. They even have like a little behind the scenes thing with Errol Morris when they made these commercials.
Do you want to know about every element of your health? Most people would say yes. If we could reinvent the way that diagnosis is done, which means every person having access to actionable health information at the time it matters, we're proof that this is possible.
They had a ton of different people that were getting their finger stick sample, and they have an employee one as well. But also Patrick is responsible for the way the building looked, and I don't think we'll see this in the show, but they did move buildings. They were originally in the old Facebook building, but I don't think we'll see that in the show because there's only 2 episodes left, so I don't think they'll have like a huge location change. And I think they've made in the show, basically it's like a kind of mix of both the offices, but you know, the bulletproof glass and the big Yoda signs and things like that. So that was all Patrick as well. And you can actually see those pictures of Elizabeth in that exact situation sitting below the Yoda sign. So I love seeing the original versus the show and how well they have done at emulating exactly what happened in real life.
I need that seat.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Does that work?
And I feel as though this episode, there was literally quotes that were word for word from emails, from things Elizabeth and Sunny said, and from Bad Blood, John Carreyrou's book also. So the first section, I'm going to talk about Erica Cheung and Walgreens and the testing. And we do see Erica coming into Theranos and learning very quickly that something is deeply, deeply wrong, and that they are basically fudging results and fudging calibrations for the machines, and it's a mess. So we do have them talking about Jurassic Park, and then Erica moves to Normandy. That's what they call the labs in the company. And one person I did think was missing from this episode and hasn't been too focused on is Christian Holmes. And I know in Bad Blood and in pretty much all of the material about Theranos, most people agree that Daniel Young is kind of the de facto number 3. But I actually had a chance recently to speak to a couple of people who worked at Theranos, and they all said that Christian Holmes was a lot more involved than anyone's really admitted, and that they always thought it was Elizabeth, Sunny, Christian Holmes, and then there was like a multi-level that was all of Christian Holmes' friends from Duke and Daniel Young there. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. So what I did like about them revealing all the lab stuff was how they had the character of Mark, because if you remember last week, I said I was curious what they were going to do, because the actual lab director that was the source for John Carreyrou is Adam Rosen, but that was only found out at Elizabeth's trial, because he actually went by a pseudonym in Bad Blood, and that was Alan Beam. There was another lab director at Theranos called Mark Pandori. So I think they've used kind of a mix of Mark Pandori and Adam Rosen to create the lab director in the show. And I did like how in the episode that, you know, they were making it seem as though he was very much like on Elizabeth's side and, you know, in line with all the company's kind of unseemly practices. And then at the end we get like the twist of him going to Fuse.
I won't be a whistleblower. I can point you in the right direction, confirm a few details. That's as far as I'm willing to go.
And that stuff as well was all very accurate. So I will talk about Fuse and the other stuff a bit more at the end. But when Erica is switched to Normandy and she really starts to see, you know, the sample dilution and that they're using the Siemens machine, I mean, it's honestly like it's unbelievable what they were doing. And I've talked about this in my other videos with Theranos, but I used to work in a lab, and it's just absolutely wild that they thought that they could do this in the first place. So we do see Erica working on the samples for Walgreens, and again, kind of in the way that they've been combining a lot of storylines, I think that they've kind of mixed together Walgreens and Safeway a little bit, because Walgreens at this stage that's shown in the show, they had about 40 locations in Arizona, and they actually changed the law in Arizona so that patients could request their own blood tests. And Elizabeth was the one who like went and talked to all these people about it and really got it changed. And then Safeway are the ones that they were getting their employees' blood testing run through there, but Safeway had actually spent like a ridiculous amount of money, millions and millions, on getting these fancy wellness centers. I do actually have a screen grab of the Theranos website, and you can see one of the little wellness centers, and there's other pictures on the internet too, that Walgreens didn't spend this money to get these fancy wellness centers. They just kind of worked with what they had and, you know, got on with it. But because Safeway spent so much money, like, they were in a way worse spot than Walgreens, but they were also obviously fudging the Safeway results. So moving on to George Shultz, and one of my favorite parts of this episode was George Shultz's wife, Charlotte, who is played by the amazing Anne Archer. She is Alice's mom in The L Word and The L Word Generation Q, for any L Word fans. And Anne Archer, you just see her subtly play this throughout the episode, but you see Charlotte get more and more skeptical as the episode goes on.
Tesla harnessed electricity. Steve Jobs gave us heights to reach.
And that was pretty accurate to real life, because Charlotte and Henry Kissinger and a lot of other people said, oh, we think something is wrong here. But George Shultz was very adamant that, you know, like we saw in the show, Elizabeth was exactly who she said she was.
Sure.
George, they both work there. They know what they saw.
No.
And she kind of manipulated a lot of people this way with the demos that they mention. And I've said this in a previous video, but what she used to do is she used to have the Edison, obviously, and she'd take their blood, take them on a tour or speak to them or something, so that another employee could run in, get the blood, run out, go and do it in the old-fashioned way, like on a bench, and then run back in and just put the results in like a printer. And then they would come back in, spit out the results. And she did this with a lot of reporters too, like the Fortune cover and all of those reporters that gave her all these glowing reviews. They did that as well. And it used to come through on your phone as like an app too. So she was able to do all this. And the other thing with George Shultz, and these two things have only really recently come out, like the end of 2022, was this all happened because of Elizabeth's trial. And George Shultz actually got given by Elizabeth a huge chunk of shares that were worth a lot of money. So that also played into it. And then George Shultz's first wife actually died of pancreatic cancer. And when Elizabeth was pitching it to him, she was saying like, oh, we can detect pancreatic cancer way before, you know, because that is unfortunately one of those cancers that usually it's caught too late. So she really was a master manipulator and whatever else you want to say, but she really did kind of pull one over on all these men that were on her board.
There are very few times in my life when I have been given the chance to do something that is purely good. And this is one of those times. This company is going to save lives.
So last week I was saying I was interested to see what they did with the lab director character. And I said I think that they are going to make kind of a combo of Mark Pandori, who was one of the lab directors, and Adam Rosen, who was one of the lab directors. It was a little bit strange the way they called him Mark, and then he had a similar last name to Rosen, but Adam Rosen was actually using a pseudonym in John Carreyrou's book Bad Blood. He went by Alan Beam in the book. And this exactly, I mean, they played around with the details a little bit. It was Adam Clapper from Pathology Blog that kind of started this whole chain reaction, but he actually reached out to John Carreyrou because he had helped him with something on the Medicare fraud story that Carreyrou had wrote before. So it is very similar to what they show in the show about Richard Fuse and Phyllis Gardner and Rochelle Gibbons being this little band of Theranos skeptics, and also the way that things were tweaked a little bit was a lot of the meetings in the show or conversations are actually emails or phone calls. Like that scene at the end where Fuse and Mark are in the car together talking, that really is exactly a line that Mark said to Richard Fuse about, we're a physician, we took the Hippocratic Oath. This episode, they literally had so many lines that were directly from the book. And when Sonny was saying to Tyler, the reason I've taken so much time away from work, that was from an email.
Oh God, you think you're the good guy here. The only reason I've taken so much time away from my work to address you personally is because you are George Schultz's grandson. Do you get that?
And there was lots of other things, but the way that they did the scene in like the car and stuff with the like, you know, at night, it was pretty good. And that was really a phone call. But a lot of how they found these people, like with John Carreyrou reaching out to, you know, 20 former employees, it really was through LinkedIn, and it, you know, a lot of them didn't respond. The NDAs were really ironclad, and a lot of people weren't even allowed to put Theranos on their LinkedIn. So they, you know, it was really difficult to get people to talk, and Tyler and Erica took a huge risk doing it.
What is it?
And when we see at the end where Tyler has like the flip phone, he actually went out and bought a burner phone to talk to John Carreyrou.
John Carreyrou? This is Tyler Schultz.
And next episode, I really think we're going to see stuff really explode, because Elizabeth, you know, last episode was right at her peak.
Trajectory to be just as much a career for women as it is for men. To see a woman leading such a strong company
and you know, we saw Phyllis at the end with the Fortune covers and everything. That's her absolute pinnacle peak, and she's, you know, adored, and everybody loves her and wants to interview her.
Successful women experience something called imposter syndrome,
Right.
where they feel that none of their success is actually earned, that it's all a fraud, and they will eventually be found out.
And things with Carreyrou have really started, you know, the ball rolling. So it did take a long time for John Carreyrou to get his story out. He originally got the call and, you know, talking to Richard Fuse and Phyllis and all these things in about February, and then he thought he was going to be able to publish in May because he had gone and get himself tested. He'd spoken to, you know, Alan Beam and all these other people, and he was ready to go. But then Elizabeth Holmes sent David Boyce after him, and I'm sure they're going to show this in the show, but David Boyce was like having these people followed for over a year. They were really coming after them, threatening them. They just were absolute animals when it came to attacking these people. And John Carreyrou actually got like some doctors and nurse practitioners and even patients who had gotten these crazy results from Theranos, and they'd had to go to the emergency room because, you know, their doctor thought they were having a heart attack because of the results. And he had got all these people, you know, on the record. And then Sonny would like fly to the physician's office and threaten them and say, you know, we're going to destroy you, because they had so much money and so much power, and they had David Boyce, like the best lawyer in the country. You know, of course people are not going to want their life ruined. And I'm sure they're going to show this next week, but Erica actually was the official whistleblower, so she was a bit more protected. But Tyler, his parents spent nearly $500,000 on his legal fees to, you know, fight this, and they were at the stage where they nearly had to sell their house to like pay for the legal fees to help him. So it's really going to get crazy next week, and we only have 2 episodes left. There's still so much to fit in, so I'm really excited to see how they wrap this up, because they might just do like the, you know, the text on the screen to say what ended up happening to her. And Sunny's trial is still on at the moment, of course. It's only just started, so I wonder how they're like, will they show anything that happened kind of after her downfall? I know at the start of the series we saw, you know, the interviews and stuff, so maybe that's where we're gonna end. But yeah, there's still a lot to go, and it's probably going to be the craziest next episode when we see all the, like, you know, theranos coming after them. So I am really excited to see what happens next week, and of course for the final episode. Let me know what your favorite part of the episode was. Make sure to follow me on my social media. I have a Patreon, a merch store. All of my socials are down below. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and check out some of my other ones or some of my videos on my main channel as well. And as always, make sure to stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
I followed a challenge, and I think the reason I got into engineering was because I looked at it and I said, that looks hard. That's a challenge, so I'm gonna do it.
Everybody can do this. I'm just a scientist who happens to be a woman.
Usually my daughter asks me, what do you do? I can tell her exactly what I do. It inspires her too.
It's so empowering and powerful to be a part of a company created by a woman who is so incredibly intelligent and also nurturing. And I think that's the role model that we need. We need more of these role models for young women.
To see a woman leading such a strong company and leading with these huge ideas and doing so in a very technical manner, and how much that does inspire other young women to want to pursue these not only technical dreams, but to not be afraid to dream really big.
I think it's definitely on the trajectory to be just as much a career for women as it is for men.
You know, people talk about glass ceilings. I always say that next to every glass ceiling there's an iron lady.